Celeb Savant is a career retrospective type interview focusing on singers, actors, and industry experts. Join Barrett Edelstein now as he dives into the entertainment world.
British Harrison Hickman is the author of the novels Behind the Window, Set in Stone, A Life Called Scarlet, and The Unconvinced, as well as the short story collections Life Cycle and I Remember. His work has also appeared in numerous literary anthologies. Alongside his writing, he runs the Creative Interviews blog, where he speaks with writers, artists, and musicians about their work and creative process. Harrison's latest book, the short story collection Collecting Nutmegs, is due for publication in late 2026. Up next on Celeb Savant, we've got Harrison Hickman. Where are you in the world and how are you doing?
Well, I'm currently in Cornwall in the UK at the moment, and I am doing okay. Working on a new project at the moment, which is going okay. This new project has sapped a lot of the energy out of me. It's taking a lot out of me, and it's what I would describe it as my most ambitious project to date. And details will be released on my social media feed in the near future once the first draft is done. But I'm doing okay. How are you doing?
I'm all good, thank you. So before we get into this latest project, let's rewind. At what age, whether as a child or teenager, did you think, okay, I want to be in this creative writing world? And then how did that journey progress?
It's always been there in some way, shape or form. And, I remember, the idea of being able to create something, not necessarily write something, but being able to create something, being able to create another world, being able to create other characters. And then originally, when I first started out, I was writing, sort of fantasy fiction, young adult fiction. But then I wanted to go into slightly darker territory. I suppose that, I became a real writer in my own mind when I started working on the Lost Brotherhood series, which was much more darker fiction than I'd ever done. And that's more character driven. So it's always been there in some way, shape or form. But I think with every single book, I'm discovering everything all over again.
That's interesting. Why do you say that?
But I think every book has got, for want of a better term, got a soul at the center of it. So each book has got a driving force behind it. And then with each book, you're discovering a little bit more about your craft, a little bit more about how you are as a writer, how you respond to different things. And with this book that I'm doing at the moment, it's almost like it's been fighting back at me. It almost doesn't want to be written. And, with a Life Called Scarlet, for instance, I had so many ideas for it when I originally first started doing it. But then what happened was that as I got into it and I started playing with these different ideas, and I realized that each of these different characters who weren't going to have narratives suddenly had voices. So their narratives started coming in. And then before I knew it, I had all these different narratives. Books, even well-planned books, they tend to change as you go through it. So you have to learn all over again. Even if I'm doing a book that's a sequel to something else, I've got to learn my craft from scratch, because you never know what's going to happen. You never know the different characters and how they're going to respond.
So what was the inspiration earlier on to say, okay, you wanted to move from the young adults into more of a darker territory?
In lighter fiction, it's something happens, there's a little bit of a misunderstanding, characters go through so much trauma, but they always come back at the end. And I always used to think, well, what if things don't work out? When I started the Lost Brotherhood series, this was going to be very vastly different than anything else I'd done before. So, it was set in an alternate version of the real world, where it's much more militaristic. It's peppered with real locations, real cities, real streets, real places to give that real strong feeling. When you get that sort of strong grasped feeling, it becomes much, much darker. That appealed to me more, because if I set things in the real world, if I set things that don't necessarily have a happy ending, then I can explore a lot more. I think, it allows you to explore a lot more if you have much darker fiction.
From the point of zero to conceptualizing a story with characters in the fictional world, is that an easy process for you, or does it take time for you to develop a world that you want to write about?
It depends on the project. I mean, for the Lost Brotherhood series, the world has come fairly easy. I know what's going to happen. But there's 7 books in total, and I've finished the fourth one. I'm preparing the fourth one for publication. But now I'm finding that I'm starting to have to put a timeline of events that precede the first book. It's never about the places. I find it's more about the time impacts. And it occurred to me that I don't actually know when the book is set. I don't know whether it's set in the far future or even in the far past. So I had to set it in a parallel world to ours. It was the time that was the challenge. But with what I'm doing at the moment, the book I'm working on at the moment, which is it is set in a parallel version of our world, it's quite hard to imagine some of the things that happen in it. The challenge for me was to work out, how do people react when they see something. The central thing that happens in the book I'm working on at the moment impacts every single person, in different ways. And I kept thinking, how would I react if I saw that? What would I do? And that, to me, is the challenge. It's never about the physical design of it. I mean, anyone can create a city. Anyone can design streets. Anyone could design, a coastline or whatnot. But the challenge is always, how do the people react? What happens, if they see something and they don't like it, or they like it too much, or they decide to take advantage of it.
When creating a world or a book, how do you know a book is going to be part of a series compared to a standalone novel or book?
With the Lost Brotherhood series, it was only supposed to be the first book. But then I realized very quickly that there were going to be more books to it. And then I realized very quickly after that there were going to be 7. I don't see that as a series of books. I see it as one book with 7 large chapters, because it is essentially the Lost Brotherhood series is about a man discovering who he is through the various adventures that he has in this world. I mean, with a life called Scarlet, which is a girl band in the 90s, that was going to be just the one book. But then I realised that there's more to this than meets the eye. So the book I've just released, The Unconvinced, which acts as both a sequel to A Life Called Scarlet and also a prequel as well. And there'll be another few books after that. I think that with some of the books I've done, I just know they're part of a series. Other books I'm less so, but I know that there's a few bits and pieces that are going on. And some books I do believe they're part of a larger construct.
What are some of the challenges that you have overcome in the journeys of writing a book?
Well, I mean, it's all about, there has to be a lot of discipline. If you're going to approach a project, even a small project, even a short story, you have to be disciplined in doing it. So making sure that you do this certain amount of words a day, but also that you are, for want of a better term, you show a commitment to your characters and to bringing them alive. So a very strong sense of discipline, and a strong sense of trying to understand more about your book, not just sitting there and writing it, but thinking, okay, what's going on here? How is this happening? Why is this happening? You need to be able to view things both from an outsider, but you've also got to put yourself in the scene as well. What would I see if I was there? But I found, recently that sometimes, some books, or some stories that I do, I tend to use the same descriptions over and over again without realizing it. So it's, I have to make sure that I've got, I'm always introducing new words, the nuts and bolts that make a story flow along. Sometimes, I do a section and it just flows. It just really, really works. There's a section, for instance, the book I've just done, that I was looking forward to writing. I was looking forward to it for weeks, and when it came up, it didn't flow as well as it could have done. I now felt that it dragged on a little bit. So there's always challenges, and you always think, can I do better next time?
You referenced that the Lost Boys series, the 4th book is coming out later this year, correct?
Yeah. Possibly next year.
So when did the first one come out? And over what period of time do you think that the whole series will be completed?
So the first one came out in 2016.
Okay.
So I released it, I think it was April, May 2016. I'm currently revamping the books at the moment and re-releasing them. So that's hopefully going to take place later this year, or try to do it alongside when the 4th one comes out. But the release, the first book in 2016, the second one came out in 2018, I think. Yes, it was 2018. And the next one came out in 2021. So there's been a regular gap between each of them. But with this series, I've planned it all out, and I'm not sure when I anticipate having the last book done. I hope to have all of them released in the next 10 to 15 years, because the ending of the last one, I know the ending of it, but I'm not quite sure how exactly that ending is going to flow. So I need to work out how the whole story is going to knit itself together. But I anticipate having them all released within possibly the next 10, 12 years.
You mentioned earlier that you're going to be re-releasing or revamping a couple of the books. Why does an author do that? For what reason?
When you want to sort of keep it fresh, keep it new. I mean, I love to sort of revamp books, front covers, maybe altering the typesetting a little bit and making it appeal, I think, a lot more, and making sure that it's available very strongly in ebooks as well, because I think a lot of people now like to download ebooks because they're a lot cheaper. With revamping it, it makes it a lot more exciting, new front covers, and it's a way of almost like giving it like a second launch, a second rebirth. I like to do that every so often.
With regards to the cover of a book, do you have full design and say of how you want it, or do you get guidance from someone else?
Well, I mean, I design all the covers myself, and I tend to have very minimalistic covers. As I do like the minimalistic outline to it, and with the with Life Called Scarlet, it's got a very sort of Scarlet type cover. With The Unconvinced, it's got a picture of a man walking into the mist. I'll explain a little bit more about that in a few moments. Sorry, because there's something that's quite relevant to the covers and to the theme of the Scarlet books. But I do generally try to have a very strong minimalistic approach to front cover design, because I think that tends to appeal a lot more to people. Because if you have a minimalistic design, then that appeals to everyone. People who like to read genre fiction, people who like to read literary fiction, and people who like to read everything in between. So it's about making those books appeal to a wide variety of people. The Scarlet books, for instance. So A Life Called Scarlet, and this goes back to my earlier comment that I thought A Life Called Scarlet was going to be the only book in that series. I thought it would just be a one-off great book about a girl band or whatnot. What I did with The Unconvinced is that The Unconvinced features some of the same characters, but has a very different plot involving a serial killer. And so what I decided to do was that it's like the third volumes I'm in the initial stages of planning at the moment. But with each of these Scarlet Lake series, as I call it, I want each of the books to have a very different theme to it. So A Life Called Scarlet is, literary novel about girl band in the 90s. The Unconvinced is a crime thriller. Both those books, part of the same world, but different flavors, if you know what I mean. And that translates into the front cover. So Life Called Scarlet, very minimalistic, the kind of thing that you'd see in the literary fiction section of a bookshop. The Unconvinced, you probably find that in the crime thriller section of the bookshop. And I like to have those different themes. The third volume will be sort of a mishmash of the first two.
Now, you referenced earlier that sometimes it takes a little bit longer. For example, there was that section of the book that you were looking forward to writing, that section, and then it became a little bit more laborious. So when you're going through those periods, when it's that, does it frustrate you, or do you just realize, okay, well, this is where it's at in this moment?
It does frustrate me. There's almost a sense of acceptance. I mean, with that scene in the book, I'm looking forward to doing it sometime. And all it is that it's a group of friends get together in a bar, and one of them is a professor and explains about a theory. And it's about how he approaches that theory and how he discusses that theory. And I was looking forward to doing that bit when he has a glass of wine on the table and he just explains how this thing works. But then, I found that when I was doing it, he was explaining it a little bit too much. So, when I go back to it, I'll probably take down the explanations a little bit. And the professor also tells a story, which I didn't envisage when I came up with the scene. So I'll have to go back through that and shrink that description, maybe shrink the story a little bit as well. But generally, I mean, it's one of those things that, there's a scene that you're looking forward to doing. It doesn't always go to plan, but you go through it again and you edit it, and then you think, okay, right. But sometimes it's a good thing. Sometimes it's a very good thing that, you have a scene that's planned, a scene that you're looking forward to, and it decides it's going to go off in this direction instead.
I go to sleep every night. I'm in my bed with my book. I'm reading my book, and it's a real book because I like turning the pages. Because I hear from so many people these days, oh, they don't read books anymore. So for anyone who was a book reader, who is no longer reading books for whatever reason, what would you say to them to say, get a book in your hand again?
Well, I always say go for a paperback or a hardback rather than an electronic. But I've managed to read one ebook in my life, but I've had a lot of difficulty with it. It was very difficult to focus on it, and my eyes kept wandering down the page, and it was interfering with my sleep because I was looking at harsh light 11 o'clock at night. But with a paperback, it's a lot better. And if you finish a book, people say, "Oh, I've got to worry about keeping the book on the bookshelf, and it's just going to take up room." Well, you finish your book, you give it to somebody else, or you give it to a charity shop.
I read my books over and over again. So I keep it, and then like when it inspires me again, I'm like, okay, well, let's take it out again and read it over. Any thoughts and ideas of potentially creating any of your stories for television or film?
Well, I mean, I've in discussion with some people at the moment about adapting books into television and film. I've been thinking about, getting really big into script writing and adapting it myself. But the problem with adapting anything into a film or a TV series is the cost of doing so, production costs, actors' fees, health and safety, so on. I mean, I talked to a short filmmaker a couple of years ago now, and she did a 20-minute film, and the amount of money that she had to raise for it was absolutely staggering. I can't remember the exact amount, but it was absolutely eye-watering because she had to worry about actors' fees, health and safety costs, post-production edits, and I think that's
Location, all that stuff. Equipment.
yeah, everything. And with prose, the only thing you need to worry about is the only limit that is up here. I don't need to worry about actors' fees or anything like that. But I'm in discussion with some people who are in the film and TV industry, and they're reading my books. But of course, the problem is that even if they say, "I'd really like to make this into a film," it's raising the money to do so. So,
Yeah.
I mean, I hope that they are adapted, but at the end of the day, it's a very, very tricky business.
I'm not mentioning names or anything for obvious reasons. There are a bunch of different books, and one specific in mind that, for example, they made one film out of it and a television series. And what was represented on the screen was completely, utterly different compared to what was actually in the book. And I got irritated because I'd read the book. I was like, but this is not what's happening. Like I was shouting at the screen and I got irritated. So potentially, let's say you intend to put it out there and it will be on the screen and the money will be raised. How close are you going to have it to the book?
I understand that if someone decides to adapt it, that they're going to have their own vision for the story. They will want to perhaps emphasize different things or maybe cut certain things out. For instance, if A Life Called Scarlet was adapted into a film, there's a lot of stuff that they would have to cut out. For instance, the flashbacks that some of the characters have to their early lives would have to be cut out or edited down. And I understand that because obviously A Life Called Scarlet takes place over 15 years. 15 years fitting it into 90 minutes is a bit of a challenge. So, I understand that a filmmaker would have their own ambition, their own vision for it, and I understand that. So it's about how the filmmaker wants to take it forward. Should they decide to give it a shot? But I understand that with a book being taken into a film, not everything that I want is going to be in there.
I agree with you, although that sometimes instead of minimizing and taking things out, they change the story completely, and that's what frustrates.
Yes, I know. If I've seen a fair few books being adapted.
Yes, it's like, but that's completely not what happened in the book. Anyway, so you're saying that the next book will be coming out either later this year or next year. You're busy with reissues or revamps. Anything else that you can tell us is coming up, or you're just focusing on these elements?
Releasing a short story collection, which I'm planning for later this year, called Collecting Nutmegs. It's a very small book. I think it's 5 or 6 short stories. Been working on the project for a while, but finally getting ready for publication. And there's a variety of other bits and pieces as well, and they will all be on my social media feeds.
So look forward to all of that. So Harrison, the podcast is listened to throughout the world. As a final message to the audience, what would you like to say?
Well, I always say to people, read lots of books. There's so much out there. There's so much, there's so many little forgotten gems out there on the bookshelf.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Celeb Savant. Please follow Barrett on TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, and Facebook at Celeb Savant. That's CelebSavant.